Well, breaking news now. Former President Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in his New York hush money trial. Trump is now the first president in U.S. history to be convicted of a criminal offense. The jury deliberated for more than 11 hours before reaching a verdict. The 6-week trial centered on the concealment of a hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels just ahead of the 2016 election. Daniels claimed she had a sexual encounter with Trump in 2006, which Trump denies. In order to keep Daniels quiet, she was paid $130,000 by then Trump attorney Michael Cohen less than 2 weeks before the election. The jury found the manner in which Trump reimbursed Cohen constituted falsification of business records. The trial, which started in mid-April, featured weeks of testimony by witnesses, including Daniels and Cohen.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here.
Louisiana's own and current U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson responded to the verdict, saying in part, quote, "Today is a shameful day in American history. Democrats cheered as they convicted the leader of their opposing party on ridiculous charges, predicated on the testimony of a disbarred convicted felon. This was a purely political exercise, not a legal one." And Louisiana's Governor Jeff Landry commented as well, saying, quote, "This is a dark day for our country, where the very justice system that had been a hallmark of justice for hundreds of years has been replaced with a two-tiered system based on politics. I do have faith that the American people will not tolerate this."